Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good night, depending on when you're watching this. But for me right now, it's morning, and today I got something to share with you that I wrote. It's about 10 pages long, probably take about 15 or so minutes, maybe even a little more, to read through. A lot to think about, a lot to digest. The title of it is The Emptiness of Modern Life. And that's obviously what we're going to be talking about, all those things in modern life that really don't bring us happiness, don't bring us joy. They actually, in fact, take away from our lives instead of adding to our lives. And that's not to say that there's not a lot of things in modern life that aren't adding to our lives. There are, but yeah, I think there's just a lot to think about. A lot of things we can do in our lives to live a better, healthier, more balanced life, and that's what this is kind of pointing out. So let's just jump in. I'm going to get my reading glasses on. I'm going to read straight on through. Hopefully there's not too many background noises. And then, as always, you guys leave your thoughts, comments, or experiences, whatever you want to write in the comments. It's all welcome. And yeah, we're gonna have a good time. All right, let's jump in. The emptiness of modern life. I think we can all feel it, sense it, taste it in the air. It is very difficult to articulate, to put into actual words, but I believe that most of us feel it at some level. We know deep down in our spirit, there's something very wrong with our modern world. We wonder, what could it be? Why, in a world filled with material goods, all available at one press of a button, one click of the mouse, why is it that very often we feel so dissatisfied? How can it be, in a world where we can connect with the entire planet through social media and other methods, that many of us actually feel as if we are not connected to anything at all? Surrounded by a massive crowd, but utterly alone. Perhaps I'm the only one who has felt like this as I trudge through this modern world, but maybe, just maybe, there are others out there who feel the same way. Judging by the sadness I see in the eyes of many of my fellow Americans, not to mention the high rates of suicide and people taking high-powered antidepressants, I feel very confident saying, I'm not the only one who sees this or feels this. I understand we all put on a brave face most days, perhaps post some happy pictures to social media, maybe even force out a cheery hello to someone as we shuffle past them on the street. But I think for most of us, the gnawing sense in the back of our minds, it never quite leaves us. It only quiets when we distract ourselves with any number of distractions our modern society offers. Sometimes we protest, only in our minds, of course. Something's wrong, we say. Something's off. This world is not right. Why am I surrounded by all these things, and yet I feel so empty? Our modern world is ever so quick to respond to these little uprisings, quick to remind us we live in the most amazing age in history, a golden age of mankind's greatest achievements. Life has never been so good. So it must be us. We must be a bunch of wretched and ungrateful individuals. After all, mankind has never had it so good. Wouldn't you agree? We reflect on this for a while, conclude society must be right and we must be wrong. And yet, the gnawing feeling persists. But we stuff it down and trudge on, and so it goes, day after day, week after week, year after year. So what is this gnawing feeling? What is this disturbance deep within our spirits? I believe it's a combination of things, but for the sake of time and staying focused on identifying the main problems, we will focus in on just a few of them. The first problem is a lack of a deep personal connection with God. I believe this comes back to the distraction factor. The modern world is filled with bells and whistles, baubles and trinkets of every kind. That, combined with the overwhelming volume of entertainment options, some relatively harmless, many very harmful to our emotional, spiritual, and in some cases, physical well-being. I believe if this is not closely monitored by the individual, if self-control and moderation are not exercised, many of these things can leave your connection to God hanging by a thread. I'm not talking about salvation itself. That is a gift from God the moment a person places their faith in Jesus Christ. It is a permanent, irrevocable, and eternal gift. The issue I'm talking about is the issue of our daily walk with God, our personal connection. Is it any wonder that even as believers, we sometimes feel that God is a million miles away? The good news is the solution is actually very simple. Using the same finger we scroll through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, using that very same finger, we can reach for the off button, and with one simple click, we can begin to improve our connection with God, as well as our connection with the people who are actually around us in real life. As you listen to this, you might be forming the opinion I am against the modern technologies, against the social media outlets, against all things modern. That is definitely not the case. I'm actually for anything that is more efficient, more cost-effective, anything that adds value to the average human being's life, anything that makes our social connections better, anything that improves our everyday lives in a meaningful and positive way. Modern society does offer many things that do indeed fit that criteria. I believe that all the problems come when we begin to replace our connection with God and our connections to other people with social media and all the other distractions of this modern world. That leads me to my next point, and in this point is a great irony, a massive contradiction. And that contradiction is this: social media was designed to make human connections better, and yet, in so many cases, it does the exact opposite. It destroys real human connection and replaces it with artificial connections that do very little to satisfy the human need for relationships. All right, need to get a little drink of water and we will continue. Okay. Before I start in on the negative effects of social media on society at large, I just want to add a quick disclaimer. Social media is a powerful tool for communicating ideas, knowledge, information, and entertainment. It is able to do this on a scale so massive that it is truly mind-blowing. I view social media as a tool capable of great good, but also capable of great evil. Unfortunately, one of the great evils that has emerged from the rise of social media is the eroding of human relationships in real life, and in some cases, a complete disconnection from reality itself, depending on the type and volume of content consumed. Most people have heard the phrase, "How deep does the rabbit hole go?" This is, of course, a reference to the story of Alice in Wonderland, when Alice follows the white rabbit down the rabbit hole and finds herself in an insane world completely disconnected from all reality. Some speculate the author, Lewis Carroll, was on some pretty heavy-duty drugs when he wrote the story. That certainly seems plausible to me. The story was written in the year 1865 and is still alive and well today. The point of all this is, the story, Alice in Wonderland, is a perfect analogy for what has happened with social media. But instead of just Alice following the white rabbit down the trail, now it's millions, even billions of people following the white rabbit. I have caught myself following the rabbit on more than one occasion, getting stuck on a handful of content creators, all spewing the same types of things. I've gotten a bit too wrapped up in some of the manosphere content, red pill content. I don't think I ever fully bought into it, but I certainly found myself further down that rabbit hole than I should have been. I have experienced the same thing with some Christian-based channels. Many of them sensationalize things, always going for the views, the subs, the likes. Just because a channel slaps the word Christian on it, that certainly does not mean that they are there to help you in your day-to-day Christian walk, to help you to understand the completeness of salvation. No. Those things are too practical and don't tend to draw a crowd. A lot of channels label themselves as Christian channels and profess that they are there to guide you along or help you in your life, are nothing more than entertainers and performers. I have no problem with people who entertain and perform. What I have a problem with is people who profess to be teachers, preachers, and pastors, all there to improve your Christian walk, knowledge of the Bible, etc., and then they immediately proceed to sensationalize topics, perform, and entertain for the crowd. Why do they do this? I think the answer is obvious. Because it works. It brings people in. I'm not saying that some of them don't offer some real value at times. I think there is real value mixed in with a lot of useless fluff. And in some ways, all that fluff and sometimes flat out false information almost completely flushes out any of the real value in the messages. I think this brand of Christianity disgusting. I find this brand of Christianity disgusting. At the end of the day, it's a commercial transaction. They are selling God, and lots of people are buying. But the sad reality is, they care very little about people, or people's relationships to Jesus Christ, or people actually growing strong in Jesus Christ alone. Why would they want that? The goal is to make people dependent on that church, that pastor, that set of teachings. People who are confident in their position as a son or a daughter of God, confident in the completeness of their salvation, confident in their relationship with Jesus Christ, people like that, well, they just don't make very good customers, now do they? The goal of many of these churches, these institutions, is to make people dependent on the institution itself and the people operating the institution, and not dependent on Jesus Christ himself or the Word of God. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all institutional churches are bad for your spiritual health. There are some churches, teachers, and pastors that actually teach salvation correctly and are pretty grounded in the Word overall. But sadly, this is the minority and not the majority. My personal view is this. If they cannot teach salvation by belief alone correctly, and they are trying to sprinkle in works or any other nonsense into salvation itself, then that's a hard no from me. I might go to one of these churches with a friend when I'm visiting from out of town or something like that, just to be sociable, and also it can open doors of conversation. So there is always the possibility of helping someone break free of one of these legalistic and gospel-twisting organizations. But as far as regularly attending one of these institutions that completely perverts and twists salvation, that's definitely a no for me. It doesn't matter if they are correct on many other points of doctrine. Any church, teacher, preacher, or pastor that does not teach salvation clearly and correctly has built their house on the sand with no foundation, and it's a guarantee that house is going to be a twisted mess. And many start to see this if they are willing to take a hard look and do a thorough inspection. But sadly, a lot of people will never bother to look that close simply because they like the pastor, the church decorations, the good vibes, the congregation, or any combination of these and numerous other reasons. I strongly believe that none of these reasons are good enough to keep attending a church that routinely preaches a false salvation, a false gospel. The clear teaching of salvation by belief in Jesus Christ alone, this is the firm foundation from which all the rest of the Christian walk can flourish and grow. Those were some examples that I've come across personally, examples of how some of the content on the internet begins to pull a person down into the rabbit hole. I could give you so many more examples of this disconnect from reality, from real human relationships, and from God himself. I have observed many others go down the rabbit hole, chasing all kinds of different rabbits. And oh, how deep that rabbit hole can be. It seems as if it has no bottom, and right now we are talking about the lighter, more innocent, or at least presenting itself as innocent, presenting itself as overflowing with good intentions, the white magic side of the internet. And there is plenty to be wary of on the white magic side. But heaven help the person that falls prey to the black magic side of the internet, the strange, bizarre, sick, twisted, and ultimately truly evil side of the internet. There can be no doubt that it is presenting itself as it is truly evil and offering no apologies. Nor does it need to offer any apologies. A lot of this content is legal, but legal certainly does not equal moral. So the content flows through the internet and into people's phones, where it is greedily consumed by millions of people, young and old, rich and poor, black, white, brown. It does not care. It only cares about exploiting people, using their secret desires against them. It is like a cancer or a virus. It cares nothing for the person. It is there to exploit, to enter the person's body, mind, and spirit, and bring them to their knees, to destroy their lives, to make them a slave to their own desires and addictions. And if those out-of-control addictions end up taking the person down the road of destruction, not only to themselves, but to the destruction of anyone in the range of that person, well, it is all the more satisfied with the results. And if the person eventually ends their life in despair, it does not shed a tear or bat an eyelash. Why would it? Destruction and death was the goal from the beginning. Perhaps by this time you are wondering what it actually is. Well, it is evil incarnate. It is an entity with many moving parts, but ultimately it is the same as it always has been since the beginning, since the Garden of Eden. It has a name, and Lucifer is only one of its names. Lucifer and his hordes of demons. The Bible says that this was 1/3 of heaven. I don't know how many angels God has, but I imagine that 1/3 of heaven has to be a huge number. And unfortunately, it is alive and thriving in this modern society. All right, let me get a little drink here and we will continue on. Okay, continuing on. I imagine after hearing all this, taking it in and processing it, a person can begin to feel overwhelmed and even a bit hopeless about these things. I actually think this is a good thing, even though it doesn't really feel good. I'm just saying that if talking about these dark things has an effect on you, anger, sadness, a feeling of being overwhelmed, that's a good thing. It means you are in alignment with the right side, because I am pretty confident God feels some of these same things, with the exception of being overwhelmed. He promises in his word that he will bring all this evil and injustice to an end someday. But for now, evil remains. I must admit, I'm not quite sure why God has let things play out this way. I wish he would end it sooner rather than later. But at the end of the day, I just have to trust that he has his reasons. It is not my job or your job to know every reason, every detail. God lays out the events prophetically and simply asks us to trust him. It is also important to note that we have a part to play in all this. Our part is much simpler and much smaller, but from the human perspective, even our small part can seem overwhelming. Our small part is to point others to Christ for their salvation in the same way we were saved, simply by believing in Jesus Christ for salvation. And beyond that, we can take a stand against evil, speak out against evil, actively fight against the forces that threaten to destroy our society, our countrymen, our neighbors, our friends, our families, and never forget, we ourselves are on the menu as well. It cannot take our salvation, but if we are not careful, if we are not watchful, if we are not keeping our eyes on Jesus Christ, make no mistake, do not underestimate it. The uncanny ability it has to entangle us in its tentacles and dim the light of Christ in us. It is indeed a powerful enemy, but its primary weapons are lies, deception, intimidation, temptation, using people's primal desires against them, leading them into addiction, into hopelessness, into confusion, into fear, and anxiety. I believe just being aware and alert can go a long way, and also not allowing these powerful forces to get a foothold in our hearts and minds. Social media and the internet overall can be beneficial in certain cases, but when you take away moderation, wisdom, discernment, and allow yourself to fall headfirst into one of these rabbit holes, severe consequences to your mental, spiritual, emotional, and in some cases even your physical health will be sure to follow. I certainly believe there is a balanced and healthy way to live in this modern world. In this talk, we focus primarily on the problems. In the next talk, we will focus a lot more on what I believe are some of the possible solutions for having a healthy, well-balanced Christian walk in this strange modern world. All right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and a lot to think about there, a lot to process. So, yeah, take it all in and leave your thoughts, comments, maybe a personal story. Anything you want to leave is welcome. I appreciate you watching, and God bless all of you. I will catch you on the next video.